fucking ashamed of your fucking scum.
You're fucking pigs!
Patriarchy. Fucking rape apologist, incest supporting, woman hating fucking scum.
You woman eater!
Patriarchy, fuckface.
You and your sons and your everybody and your bunch of fucking men.
Fucking scum.
This is what men's rights look like. This is what men's rights look like. This is what men's rights look like.
Feminist theory is not the Bible. It is not the Declaration of Independence. It is not the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
You're damn right we target feminist ideology. Feminist ideology teaches nothing but hate and contempt for men and boys.
Feminism must be like the psychedelic drug. I swear to God, because nothing they say is remotely close to reality.
We're going to continue to call feminists out on their hate and bigotry, and we really don't give a damn if they like it or not.
Well, you know what, feminism, if you don't like the rule of law, then don't be part of society. Go somewhere else.
Blue Collar Red Pill, with your host, the One Dan Army Dan Aarons, and Jack Nightrunner Barnes.
And welcome back to another edition of Blue Collar Red Pill Radio, folks. This is Dan. Jack might be a little bit late coming in, or I might be winging it by myself tonight. But we do have Justin Trottier from Cafe along with us for the ride, and we're going to be talking about Cafe's project, the Center for Men and Their Families, at 152 Carlton Avenue, Unit number 201 in Toronto, Ontario. Now, for those of you who have been under a rock for the last couple years or so, what has gone on is that Cafe started off by doing lectures and now has a Center for Men and Their Families full of resources for men to access and make use of in downtown Toronto. So with that out of the way, I'm going to ask Justin to come on board here and tell us the history of Cafe, first of all.
Hey, Dan.
Justin,
good to be back
here?
on the show with you. Yeah, I'm here. How's it going?
Good.
Yes. So
good. How
thank
are
you, Dan, for having me on, and I appreciate being back on the radio with you here. Well, as you said, Cafe's been around now putting on a lot of fairly high-profile lecture events at a variety of universities and colleges in Canada, largely here in Ontario, and getting quite a bit of attention for men's issues. And we have three sort of priority areas that our events have touched on: fatherhood and families, boys' education, and men and mental health issues. So we've been doing a lot of work on the campuses. And then about a year and a half ago, we decided to balance that against social service provision. So the idea was to open up a facility that would be sort of a hub for all the health and welfare needs of boys, men, fathers, and their families. And after much effort and much support from a lot of the listeners, I'm sure, we were able to successfully open to the public just last month.
Great, yeah. So, Justin, why don't you tell us exactly the history? How did Cafe start? Can you tell us exactly?
Yeah, so in late 2011, there were a number of us who had been members of other organizations with a sort of a social conscience, you might say, other human rights organizations, other organizations interested in fundamental freedoms like freedom of speech, freedom of the press, that kind of thing. And a group of us sort of got to know each other because we used to go to each other's events related to a whole bunch of social justice causes. But we realized that the one thing that was missing from all of these groups and all of these movements was a focus on boys and men. And when we started to bring up the boys and men sort of perspective within these existing social movements, we were kind of marginalized. And so we decided, okay, fine, if there's no room for that conversation in the existing social movements, then we're going to create our own movement, or our own organization at least. And we connected with a number of pre-existing men's groups here in Canada and elsewhere around the world. And that was kind of the foundation story for what became the Canadian Association for Equality. Do you want me to
cool.
continue? Because there's a lot more I could say about how we got from there to where we are today, but I'm not sure everybody will find that so interesting.
Well, I think that it should be recorded for austerity purposes, for historical purposes, because really what Cafe has managed to do has been groundbreaking and a precedent setting. So we want to, I think that the greater MHRM community out there at large should would want to know how to do that, replicate it.
Well, maybe I'll tell aspects of the story by focusing on some of our priorities, some of our strategic priorities, as a way of sharing some of the lessons that we learned, because I think we got a lot of things right, although I'm sure made some mistakes along the way, and those are instructive as well. But for me, I always thought that the universities and colleges were a key battleground, because if you don't have universities as places for the free exchange of ideas, even and especially provocative and controversial and sometimes quite marginal ideas, then there's no place in our society that's free for those kinds of conversations. And that's why I thought that we needed to start by hosting these big events at the universities and colleges. And as soon as we did, we ended up getting a lot of attention, and a lot of it was very positive and supportive. And we managed to get some big speakers out, and we got, a lot of attention from that. But there was also this kind of sideshow that started to follow us around. And that was that every time we put on one of these events, there would very often be a protest that would come along with it. And so we had to develop procedures to confront protesters. And I should say, there's nothing wrong with protests. There's nothing wrong with differences of opinion. Unfortunately, these protests very often took the form of riots. Criminal acts would take place. Fire alarms would be pulled. Doors would be blocked. Very dangerous things would happen. On occasion, there would even be assaults. Sometime on one occasion against a police officer. So it got rather extreme, and I'm sure a lot of listeners know what I'm talking about. So we had to deal with that, and we also had to continue. What's that? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I might know a few things about.
Yeah, well, you were there at a few of them, and I think you actually put yourself into some very vulnerable positions, didn't you, Dan?
They are their own worst enemy. But the after effect has been, absolutely incredible and awesome. Like they are literally they, when they open their mouths and they, repeat their idiocy, they truly are, open, honest discussions, Darwin's rejects, the evolution of discussion left them behind. And it's discussed. And the prime example really is, when Igor came to give his speech. I would say, his last name, but the prime example would be when he came, from Russia, and he experienced, a bias in the Russian courts, and how we're saying, look, this is a phenomenon going on around the world, and here is a well-respected, a BBC reporter who found bias in the courts. And they were sitting there chanting, shutting down free speech, and how he actually reacted to that was really funny. Like he was fascinated by these for lack of a better word, morons. He was fascinated by them trying to shut down free speech in a supposedly a country where free speech is supposedly one of the top priorities. And I agree.
I'm not going to give away his identity either, but he's from Russia. He lived through, the Soviet period, and he was shocked by the censorship that happened here at the University of Toronto in Canada. So I thought that was pretty amazing. But actually, there's an even worse example. I mean, in terms of the attacks on completely benevolent events, it got even worse because the event after that was actually about suicide and men. We were talking about suicide, and then the event after that was about the sexual abuse of children. And even these events, they weren't protested, but our posters were vandalized, our banners went missing. There was actually an attempt to stop us from advertising these events. Again, this is about suicide and the sexual abuse of boys. And these events were deemed to be somehow an attack on women and a misogynist sort of activity on our part. So it got pretty crazy. And just kind of pivoting now to the story about getting the men's center opened, what happened, I think, eventually was that we realized we needed a safe space. We needed a positive, affirming, and safe place where we could have our activities without the fear of constantly being censored or shut down. We're going to keep doing activities at the university. We haven't stopped those, but at the same time, we think it's important that we have a space to ourselves where boys and men and fathers and families can come in and feel safe. And we also, we didn't want to give something back to the community. We didn't want to only be always criticizing society and blaming, the forces against us, which are a challenge. But we also wanted to do something for men and boys. And so we decided that what we could do was we could open Toronto's first men's center, and I'm very pleased that we were able to do that last month.
Yeah, and one of the motivating factors was Earl's suicide there. That was one of the things that kind of kicked off this journey to opening up the center. One step in many that I'm sure, and we're going to get to that a little bit later. So now we have the center, and right now they have services for men and their families facing issues from cradle to grave, pretty much. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea is to build a hub of activities. So we are interested in providing in-house services, but because we can't do everything, we've also been setting up relationships with other agencies in Toronto so that where we don't have the services in-house, we can refer boys and men and fathers to other agencies, and we will have vetted those agencies. So we will know that they will be friendly to the kind of clients, the kind of boys and men that we would be sending. I mean, one of the problems is Toronto does such a great job of providing social services, but a lot of them are not open and welcoming to boys and men. And that's not me talking. That's representatives of those social services actually coming to us, knocking on our doors and saying, we're not doing a good job of bringing in boys and men. Can you help us? Can you work with us? And so, of course, we're glad to do that. So it's going to be a little bit of a combination of providing help and then also knowing where boys and men can go, if not into our center, then somewhere else to get the help that they need.
And you have a library, a growing library of scholarly lectures on the issues that men and their families face, which I'm sure that you can spread to those organizations to help educate them. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, well, we have a library of print material. So first thing we did was we built basically a clearinghouse of information. So you can come in and get magazines, brochures. We probably have the largest library of books. People still read books, I think, on men's issues, probably in Toronto. We don't have a large library, but there just isn't a lot of books on this subject matter. So we've managed to accumulate most of, I think, of the big titles on boys' health and men's issues, but also a multimedia library through our YouTube channel, Equality Canada TV, and through the videos and podcasts that we do. I think we've got a lot of content for people that are either interested, just kind of getting the lay of the land, or experts, and they just kind of want to get some new perspectives. We've got quite a bit for them to look at.
Yeah, and I've been to, I think I've been to the center 3 times now, at least twice, but 3 times maybe. And I've had a chance to, interact with the people there, the professionals that have, extended their hand to help out, addressing the issues that men and their families face. I noticed that there's a lot of I always help myself to a few handfuls of the Movember wristbands so that I can hand them out to the local MHRM folks that I know. And I always see that there's lots of literature there. I noticed that lots of literature from Prostate Cancer Canada. I noticed that you have some literature on the facts about suicide in men and the family courts, and a whole bunch of other things, pamphlets as well.
A lot of stuff on parental alienation. We have a number of board members and advisors for whom parental alienation is a very big issue. So we've got a ton of material on that. We've got material also more on education, because another one of our priorities is helping boys and young men to thrive in the school system. in Canada. So we've got a lot of material there. And we've also started accumulating government resources. There actually are a few, believe it or not, specifically on male victimization. And speaking of that, one of our other very big issues is therapy and peer support for male victims of abuse and male victims, especially boys, of sexual exploitation and sexual abuse. So we've got a ton of material and other resources in that area as well.
Okay, and the education one there, Dr. James Brown there, he is an electrifying orator on the education system. He lets us know he has given lectures letting us know exactly how it came about and how the pendulum has swung way too far, so that there are no positive, basically very few, I won't say no, but very few positive role models within the education system for young males and boys to look up to and model after. The education one is the education issue is well covered at the Center for Men and Their Families. What else is
go on.
What else? What other resources do you have there at the center?
Well, beyond the physical resources of the clearinghouse and the library that we've set up, the other thing, as I was saying, was a combination of the in-house programs and services, which I can go into, and then setting up this referral structure, which I think is really key for us to legitimately call ourselves a hub for all men's and boys' issues. I'll give you some examples of the programs we've already started. We have a counselor and therapist who works at the University of Toronto, Dr. Eleanor Levine, who has started doing one-on-one therapy sessions at the center. Those have just gotten started and will continue into 2015. We have started mindfulness meditation. We have started a discussion group looking at masculinity. We have started, or we are actually putting together a mentorship program, which probably will start next month, looking at providing services and support for boys and young men, as I said, to keep them in school, to give them the resources that they need to be successful in their studies. And then one of the priority areas that we are putting together a new program around, but this one will take a bit more time because there is an expense to it and it's complicated, and that has to do with the law. We are very interested in a program of legal aid for men and fathers who are battling an unjust legal system, whether it's family law, whether it's criminal law with false allegations of abuse and all of that, or other aspects of the law. This will be Toronto's first legal aid clinic, or legal resource center, as we're calling it, that's dedicated to men and fathers. So we're very excited about that. That one is one we're really actively fundraising for right now as part of our year-end fundraising campaign, because that's going to need significant resources. But I'm very glad to say that we have a number of really high-profile lawyers from a diverse area of the legal professions who have stepped up to volunteer with us. So that's one thing we can cross off our list. And so I think we're in a very good position to make this happen in early 2015.
So right now, currently, the drive is to expand into legal resources for men and their families to access right now. And if I heard it correctly, yes, you have your year-end fundraiser going on right now.
Yep, exactly. We do these at the end of each year. I mean, we do it throughout the year, but this is the big annual campaign. And, my pitch is very simple. We set about saying that we would open Toronto's first men's center and really the first hub for all men's issues and men's health concerns across Canada. We had a lot of people step up to support us with donations big and small. And you know what? Thanks to that support, we did it. We said we would do it, and we actually did it. And there's a lot of attempts to do what we've done that haven't succeeded. So I think this is a pretty big deal. But there's a big but here. If we're going to be sustainable, if having opened the doors, we're going to be able to keep them open longer than a couple of months, then we do need ongoing and continued financial support. It would be a real shame if we come to this point and we have really a spotlight on us from the media and from the public, just kind of watching to see if this is going to succeed or not, because it's such a new and unprecedented initiative. It simply has to succeed. If we can do this in Toronto, then we can do it in other parts of Canada. But if we fail in Toronto, Canada's biggest city, then it's going to be a lot harder to, pick up the pieces and rebuild here and elsewhere. So it's extremely important that we get this right. And I'm sure that with the ongoing support of the community, that there's no doubt in my mind that we can make this work.
Yeah, the ongoing support of the community. So Cafe is a entity unto its own that has recognized that the ideological way is not the way to solve society's issues, and relies on science and facts rather than feelings. Would that be a correct way of kind of positioning it?
Well, we do. I mean, any statements that we make, any events that we do, any time that we make a claim, it's based on, rigorous scientific evidence and facts. Having said that, of course, we're not immune to the importance of feelings and emotions. I think that it's an important balance. The brand for our center, the sort of the visual brand of our center is really a combination of prioritizing the rigorous research that we do to support and defend all of the positions that we take and all of the work that we do, but it puts people front and center in the visual imagery and in everything we do. Because at the end of the day, we can argue abstract ideologies and ideas till we're blue in the face, but if we're not helping boys and men, then we haven't really stepped up and accomplished our mission. Our mission is to help people. So that's really what we put front and center.
Yeah. And how you went about that was first creating dialogue, which is something I noticed, and something that I've seen, Victor Zen, our own, Voice for Men's own Sage Girard there, started down at Kennesaw State University. He had a wonderful group of lecturers or speakers, and put on a great show. And I will say that the feminists down there were quite a different batch. They were well behaved, and they had at least they were civil in their questioning and whatnot. They didn't go crazy like the ones up here in Canada. I don't know why. Canada seems to have some pretty virulent protesters, but again, we do support their right to protest. But inside the lecture hall itself, that's taking a little bit too far. That's that was the ridiculousness, and the crime committing. That is another issue that you brought up, and hopefully they have learned their lesson that it only weakens their position now. So what else?
Let's hope for that.
Now, there's been a claim of that you've been dishonest in the application form for CRA, the RevCan. Now, on that RevCan application form, it says that you're going to try and engage feminists in dialogue, correct?
Yes, this thing is such a mountain out of a molehill. Every time you do a charity application, every time you apply to register as a charity, and I've done this half a dozen times, because I've been involved in other nonprofits and other charities, the government asks you to explain your proposed programs. So future tense here, programs you're not currently doing, but that you would do once you became a charity, which usually happens a year after you start the application at least. So that's the context in which we were explaining these programs. And part of the programs, as you've just said, Dan, were all about dialogue. So we had explained that our intention was to put on dialogues, to put on panel discussions between different perspectives. And in these applications, you need to be specific about who your partners would be, which groups you would invite to work with you. And that's what we did. Now, if anybody actually reads the application rather than just sort of reading the third-hand rebuking of the application, they will see the way we explain it is that these are groups, these feminist groups that were that we included in the application, and there were other groups as well. These are groups that we proposed that we would work with, that we would reach out to put on these events. But nobody reads the application. What they do is they read the interpretation of the nefarious activities that we did within the process of the application. And that's kind of unfortunate because what's happened now is that these groups we had hoped to approach to work with us have decided that they want nothing to do with us. And So the people that lose out are really the students, because these would have been events, I think very interesting events that would have happened at the universities and colleges in Canada. And now it's unlikely that we would be successful even if we tried to put them on. But I should say that, there was a campaign to try to de-ratify us, to try to take away the charitable status that we enjoy. And there were calls that were made to the Canada Revenue Agency, the agency that sort of investigates these kinds of complaints. And do you know how many of these complaints they recorded in our file? Not a single one. In fact, the CRA has not opened any kind of file on us. So there's really no substance complaints, and I'm not at all concerned that it's going to go anywhere.
Well, just to clarify, and you have in fact reached, Cafe has in fact reached out and try and engage with various feminists. I'm going to use the term feminist. Social justice warrior might be another term loosely applied there, but has tried to engage feminist organizations at their lectures, and the response has been less than welcoming, shall we say.
Well, yes, and we've actually co-hosted events and been involved in events with organizations whom we don't agree with, including feminist organizations. In fact, just a couple of months ago, I was invited on a panel where I sat between two feminists talking about sexual harassment. So the idea that it was it was a smoke and mirrors gambit in the application to pretend that we're interested in dialogue. I mean, the fact is that we have engaged in dialogue. So if anybody actually looked at our track record of events, it has been open and collaborative. But of course, that doesn't fit the narrative that our opponents want to sell to the public. So they don't include that. They just include the parts of the story that might be twisted and turned to convince people that we're up to no good. I mean, speaking of only pulling at parts of the story, just one addendum to what I was saying about the charity application, the actual reports regarding our inappropriate statements on the application, those reports ignored half of the application. They ignored the half of the application where we responded to the government's requirement that we give them more evidence that we were a scholarly and well-researched organization. All of that was left out of the report. Part of the process, we actually had to submit examples of some of the research that we had done, and that research was extremely evidence-based. And interestingly enough, the reports in the news media that wanted to make us look bad left all of that out and only focused on the one or two aspects of the charity application where they thought that they could make a strong case against us.
Sorry. They did try some underhanded, sneaky moves and tried to slander and smear. They did a lot of smear campaigning on the behalf of the detractors of Cafe and by greater extension the Center for Men and Their Families. So that's one myth removed. Tell us about some of the other smear campaigns that Cafe has had to endure.
Well, we had a challenging summer, I think it's safe to say. For a couple of months, it was just one thing after another. And my response to that was, we are not going to sink to the level of our political opponents. We are going to respond with a positive and affirming, with our positive and affirming agenda, which is not focused on criticizing feminism or anybody. It is focused on helping boys and men and raising public awareness about men's health and men's issues. And so every time we had a setback or a challenge, we always managed to spin it and redirect that energy in a positive way. And I was very happy about that, because you can't control everything. I mean, a lot of what we dealt with over the summer, and I'll give you a couple of examples in a moment, was outside of our control. But the way we responded to it was our responsibility. And I was happy that I think we really rose to the occasion. So you mentioned the charity example. That was certainly one case. The other example was Equality Day. Just before the charity, the campaign of misinformation regarding the charity application, we had been attempting to put on a music festival to celebrate fathers. It was going to take place on June 1st of last year. And at the last minute, bands pulled out, at least a couple of the headliners did. Our sponsors pulled out, and then eventually the venue itself canceled on us. And the reason that was given was that it suddenly came to the attention of all of these parties, the nature of our organization, which is really quite ridiculous, because the individual who had lined up the sponsors, lined up the venue, lined up the bands, was one of our board members, and he was a personal friend or acquaintance of the bands, the sponsors, and the manager of the venue. So they knew him, and by extension, they knew exactly the issues that this music festival, Equality Day, was all about. But they got some threats, is what happened. They got threats by some of our political opponents. And so it became easier for each of these partners of ours to decide to sever their links with us and to pull out of this important event, rather than taking the courageous step of sticking to their guns and supporting us. And so that was unfortunate. But what we did, because we couldn't have the event as we wanted, was we moved the event. Change the nature of the event. Because people were spreading all this misinformation, we turned Equality Day into an information day. So we moved it to Dundas Square, which is the busiest intersection in Toronto. It's kind of like Times Square in New York City. And we decided to pass out literature and engage with the public. And we must have talked to over 1,000 people. And we talked to them about the news that they had probably read about CAFE and about Equality Day. We answered their questions directly. We took on their challenging points of view in some cases. And actually, we made some money because people voluntarily gave us some donations, even though we weren't asking for it. But we certainly cleared up a lot of the miscommunication that was out there. And in fact, we probably got more attention on our issues, both because of the attempt to shut down Equality Day and, more importantly, because of the way we turned it to our advantage by staging a public information event instead. So I think that's a really good example that when you are up against a brick wall, or you think you're up against a brick wall and nothing can be done, always look for a positive way of turning the event into something good for our community.
Now, it's funny you should actually bring up that one, and actually that was CAFE's responses have been very measured, I will say, perhaps not to the liking of everybody in the community, but it is CAFE's. At the end of the day, it is CAFE's choices, and we got to respect that, and support.
Well, let me just clarify. I mean, the tone we took was a positive and measured tone, but we didn't compromise in terms of our values. I mean, what we did was we interacted with thousands of Torontonians, and we told them that the stuff that they had been reading about us was dead wrong. And if we had just kind of walked away with our tail between our legs, that would have been thousands of people for whom the last word on this issue would have been that they had read by our opponents. So yeah, we spun in a positive way. We certainly put on our best face, but we didn't compromise in terms of the values and in terms of getting our points out there.
I wasn't talking about Equality Day in specifically. I meant for some of the times, like not all the groups agree on what moves should be made. Sometimes CAFE doesn't agree with what a Voice for Men should be doing. A Voice for Men doesn't agree with what CAFE should be doing. But at the end of the day, we do all agree that the message that men matter and that no one is invincible is what the primary goal is to fix. That those are the things that we need addressing. And we should be celebrating our differences, because we can't always all be right. Nobody is infallible. No group is infallible. And so, we should be celebrating those differences.
Absolutely. It characterizes our political opponents that they think that everybody should agree with them, and that when people have disagreements, they want to shut it down because they're afraid of that. It should characterize our movement that we celebrate that kind of diversity of opinion and diversity of thought.
Yeah. But what I was kind of leading into, the irony, I believe that on that same day, right across the street, wasn't Jeff Pereira and White Fibbin campaign there? Weren't they having a similar or some sort of event? CAFE was there. I believe CAFE was there promoting their message, which I believe would be safe to say, end all domestic violence. And White Ribbon was doing their fraudulent thing, as I would say, fraudulent thing in only ending domestic violence for half the victims.
Yes,
but
believe it or not, that was a coincidence. That was not planned on our part, anyway.
But you know what? It was serendipitously nice. It was beautiful as far as I was concerned. I do believe I fired off a few tweets to Jeff there, who promptly lied and said that I was downtown when in fact I was back here in Hamilton, Ontario. Sorry about your luck there, Jeffy. I wasn't around, but thanks for trying. By the way, I haven't. Yeah. And you know the white ribbon campaign, as far as I'm concerned, in general, you know, again, you know, they're supposed to be against domestic violence. You know, it should be against all domestic violence. You know, not half of it. And
well, can I just comment on briefly, because when the news of the opening of the Center for Men and Families broke, the main negative criticism that was reported in the press was actually overwhelmingly positive about the development, but they, for the sake of balance, they would go to, you know, feminist groups and they'd ask them, what do you think about opening a men's center? And the number one response was, what's the point? There already are groups of men who are working on gender issues. And the number one example was groups like the White Ribbon Campaign, groups of men working on issues like violence against women.
Yeah. You know, and nothing supportive for, you know, male victims of abuse. It's odd because today I was in my Twitter feed. I just happened to turn it on at the right time and caught the right tweet, and it was from Activism Hamilton, and they were talking about you know, how Mission Services here in Hamilton offers, you know, all these services, and I looked them up, and they've got, you know, services for women fleeing domestic abuse, but none for men. Yeah, and I asked them, you know, why none for men, and their response was, well, homeless shelters and drug abuse shelters. You know, there's the shelters for, you know, abused men with their children fleeing, you know, abusive spouses. So they're letting down. They're letting down all men. I'm just going to say all men.
I had a guy step into the center in the last couple of weeks, and he asked the same question of his city's social services. Where are the shelters and what services are available for male victims of abuse? And what he was told was, go to a psychiatric ward.
Well, and the thing is that they're not just letting down, you know, they're letting down heterosexual and homosexual men, because, you know, there is domestic abuse in homosexual relationships as well. And, you know, it runs across the board. And it's equal pretty much by every metric, and we've talked about you know, in various crimes too, you know, from sexual abuse to you know, domestic abuse to, you know, a few other nasties that humans are capable of. I know for myself, you know, I came across studies showing that the acid throwing incident, it's pretty much you know, it's pretty much equal to the victims and the perpetrators. So, you know, humans are equal in good and bad, and you know, feminism just doesn't seem to like that fact. It appears, and White Ribbon would be one of those feminist organizations that doesn't like that fact and refuses to accept that fact, no matter how many studies are thrown at them and you know, shown to them. Like I always say, you can lead a feminist to logic, but you can't make them think. So, anyways, yeah. Sort of ramble off tangent there. So currently there is a fundraiser, your year-end fundraiser, and it's kind of special because the donation dollars will be matched up to a certain amount. What is that amount?
Yeah, we have a group of donors, a small group of donors, who got together and said, we want to help you raise as much money as you can. So we will match every dollar that comes in up to $10,000 until December 21st. So that's this coming Sunday. We're just over halfway there, and we have just under half the time as per the original 2-week window. So it's really important that over the next few days, people donate as much as they can so that we can get to that $10,000 goal, because it would be a real shame to waste this golden opportunity. Not just the opportunity afforded us by this group of matching donors, but the opportunity afforded us by all of the momentum and really having the wind at our sails because of all of the coverage. And there's been a ton of it related to the opening of the Canadian Centre for Men and Families, I think we have had every major national news agency here in Canada and a few outside of Canada even covering this opening, again, because it's such an unprecedented milestone for men's health and men's rights in Toronto and across Canada. So it's really important that we take advantage of this opportunity.
Cool. Okay, Jack Barnes has finally made it on to, he paid up his patriarchy union dues there, and he finally made it on, I believe. Jack, are you there?
I'm here, man. I'm here. Late, but always on time.
All right. So, yeah, we're just going over the Cafe Center for Men and Their Families, and, you know, the things we're well aware of the lecture series that Cafe has. Their track record is spotless of having interesting and educated individuals give talks on, you know, issues that men face. Now, the Center for Men and Their Families has their own website up, and I'm going to put that in the chat room there. And I'm linking to the mission values and, you know, what they're hoping to accomplish there at the thing. And I'm just going to go through the description here. And the CCMF, Canadian Centre for Men and Families, is an unprecedented venue distinguishing itself in critical ways. The CCMF will balance the immediate provisions of social services to those most in need with long-term public education awareness and consciousness raising that is vital to creating wilder social change. This approach is related to the CCMF goal to provide for the needs of the community while fostering long-term empowerment over cycles of dependency. The CCMF will be dedicated to the issues of boys and men on their own terms and to bettering the health and well-being of men and boys. There will be no ideological, political, or religious approach or commitment, nor will the focus on men and boys be used merely as a mechanism to support or advance other groups. The CCMF will focus on the entire breadth of boys and men's issues, including the boys' crisis, education, bullying, suicide, creating a new sense of purpose for our sons while preserving an equally purposeful environment for our daughters. Empowering boys and men with conflict resolution and communication skills that reduce violence in our communities and benefit all members of society. Educational and other resources to improve the mental and physical health of boys, men, and all those in their lives. Workplace issues, for example, workplace safety and equality. Family law, fathers' issues and working towards the best interests of all children. Crime and punishment, legal issues focused on creating a fair system for all. Media, social, and cultural misandry. Academic misandry, for example, gender studies and cultural studies programs. The CCMF will take a comprehensive approach to boys and men's issues by engaging in a wide variety of actions and activities, all with a keen outlook and focus, including large public educational events and conferences, evidence-based research, policy writing, and engagement with the press, multimedia such as blogs, social media, and the broadcast of broadcasts and videos, social service provisions, campus outreach to a growing network of university reference and lending library, including a clearinghouse of information and publications.
Uh-oh, did we lose Dan there?
Is broadly defined as its goals. Yep. Yeah. Are you there, Jack?
Thanks, Dan. We lost you towards the tail end of that, but we heard most of it.
Okay, so up there. Are we still there, guys?
Yes, we're still there.
I'll hear you.
All right. Okay, so there's basically what the Center for Men and Their Families is goals are, and right now the push on is on to get legal representation going. Not right. Representation, legal resources, because we
legal
can't
resources and support. And if I can just pick up on what you just said, Dan, because I think there's a lot there, and certainly our goals are pretty ambitious. But in terms of the long-term vision, I think what's really important to get across is we want to catalyze a fundamental change in the way in which society relates to men and masculinity. And that's got to come from both sides. Society needs to change in terms of how it regards men's issues and needs to accept that men do have issues to do with their health, to do with fatherhood, to do with boys' education. And at the other side of it, we need to encourage men to go and get the help that they need for all of those problems. So it's really got to be a bridging between society and masculinity. That's what we mean by catalyzing that fundamental change. We have actually put up a number of stories that talk about this, that look at particular individuals and the experiences and the challenges that they have faced. We put that up as part of our fundraising appeal. It's a number of men and women talking about what they've gone through and how the center will provide services and support that would meet their needs and the needs of people like them. So I would encourage people to check out that video. It's on the website, menandfamilies.org, menandfamilies.org. It's also on our YouTube channel right now, Equality Canada TV, and I think AVFM has put up a link to it as well. But I think it's the video serves as a really good example of the kinds of people that have been walking into our doors just in the last couple of weeks since we've opened, and the urgent need for the services and the programs that we are gearing up to provide.
Can you share us a few of those the few of those stories there, Justin, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Well, the video we just put up this morning was a back-to-back. It features a older gentleman who, when he was a young boy, was actually the victim of childhood sexual abuse, in his case by a Catholic priest. And that happened over the course of 5 years. It really dominated his childhood. It's a tragic and poignant story that he shares. But the take home that he wants the rest of us to understand is how isolated he felt when he reported what was happening to himself. Finally, years later, when he came down with post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of this, there was nothing for young men, nothing for older men even, who were dealing with sexual abuse and exploitation, or the mental health issues like PTSD that come as a result of years of abuse. He finally was able to find other men like him, and they're now sort of searching for help, for programs like the kinds of support structures we're hoping to build at the Canadian Centre for Men and Families. So he tells that story in the video, and then he pleads really with the viewer to please financially support what we're doing so that we can build the programs to help people like him, and of course children who are potentially right now going through the horror stories that still fill his nightmares. And then in the second story, in that back-to-back video, we have Carol, a grandmother who comes in and tells the story of her son Andre, who has had two women in his life who have really taken advantage of him, charged him falsely with domestic violence. One of these women he actually has a child with. Thankfully, right now, the child is in his custody and the custody of his grandparents. But unfortunately, this woman, the mother of this child, has been seeking the help of women's groups. And these women's groups are pushing her to try to regain custody of this boy. Now, you have to understand, this woman has threatened that she will kill this boy, her son, and then kill herself. And so we are really worried. Carol, the woman featured in the video, is really worried that if she succeeds, she will not only break up the strength and the really strong relationship that the boy has with her father, Carol's son, but that something quite tragic could happen. And again, she is asking that we provide a legal clinic, a legal resource center for men like her son, Andre, so that he can fight to keep access to his son and preserve that warm and safe environment for their family. So these are really quite touching stories. And they are stories partly of despair, quite frankly, partly of hopelessness. But I think also if we step up and really support the success of the Center for Men and Families, then we can turn these from stories of despair and hopelessness into stories of triumph and vindication.
Yeah. So there's those two stories, but I'm sure you have a few more, some emails of encouragement, things like that.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, we've had upwards of 100 different new encounters with people who didn't know about us until a few weeks ago when the news broke, and have shared all sorts of stories. So I've given you a couple of extreme examples, but they're not unrepresentative. There have been dozens of stories, not totally unlike those two from both men and women. We've actually had some really interesting, remarkable women contact us looking to help their husbands or their sons or their fathers, because these men in their lives are so distraught that they have given up on getting help. So now these loving women have contacted us, and we're of course very happy to do what we can to help them, to help these men who they love. But we've also had positive stories from men who have themselves been victims but have managed to get through challenging times, and now they want to give something back, so they want to volunteer with us, which is just beautiful to get those kinds of offers, especially from people who have survived and thrived despite those challenges in their lives. And we've gotten some stories, just tying it back to the Legal Resource Center, from lawyers. We've actually had half a dozen lawyers who have come to us to talk about parental alienation as something that they've seen in family law, that have come to talk to us about false abuse allegations. A number of criminal lawyers have told us about these, and quite a number have volunteered to help us build this Legal Resource Center. So I am, again, really optimistic that if we can get the financial support from the community, that this is actually something we could see, the first legal aid clinic specifically for men and fathers in Toronto, possibly across Canada, in the new year, in January or February, very soon into the new year.
So did you hear that there, folks? A legal aid clinic for men going through the family courts and or criminal courts. So for men who are falsely accused or finding that the allegations are inflated or lacking validity, however you'd like to say it. But the first one, I would guess, in Canada. That's what's on the line here, folks. That's the goal. That's what your donations will help to bring about.
And let me just say, we are talking about the rule of law here. There are actually publicly funded legal aid clinics that will not service men who have been charged with certain categories of crimes. If a woman is charged with that same crime, usually these have to do with assault and domestic abuse. If a woman is charged with that crime, they have no problems giving her all the resources and support she needs. If a man is charged with those same crimes, then they will not service that man. And this has been an ongoing situation in a number of, again, publicly funded legal aid clinics in Toronto and across Ontario. So this is really something where we need to step up. Obviously, we need to do something about that injustice, and we are. We are busy filing human rights complaints and talking to lawyers about lawsuits. But meanwhile, there are men who have been charged, who are innocent of these charges and who have nowhere else to go. If we do not build this resource center, they cannot go to the existing legal aid clinics for help. These are men who are often in debt. They cannot afford lawyers. So we are kind of their last chance at justice.
Now, I just want to bring up something else that you touched upon there, Justin, or I want to retouch upon it. You mentioned how men can't go to services for domestic abuse. Now, I'm aware of a young volunteer at the center there who has a challenge going on for Osgood Hall, or is looking into a challenge at Osgood Hall, which is the legal center here at the University of Toronto, because they offer legal services to women who claim domestic abuse, but not to men. Is that correct?
That's the one at York University, but it is also in Toronto. So you're right about that. And yes, we are looking for test cases. So we are looking for men who have been falsely accused of assault or violence, one of these classes of crimes, of accusations that legal aid will not provide support to men to help with. We are looking for men to then go and seek legal aid, and then when they are denied it, we will support them if they decide to go forth, and launch a human rights complaint on the grounds that they were discriminated based on their gender.
So there you go, folks. There is action being done here. Cafe is not one to sit on their past accomplishments. They are still, continuing to raise the bar, and they're asking you to help. So they're right now. There is a dollar-for-dollar match situation going on until December 21st, correct, Justin?
Yeah, until Sunday midnight, this coming Sunday.
And Now, I'm usually in for helping to promote this. So I'd like to see what the greater MHRM can accomplish within the next 72 hours, and maybe I'll issue a challenge. Jack, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, man.
Woohoo! You made it in for the final minute there, man.
Yeah. Well,
anything to say there, brother?
I'm just going to reiterate what you said. Well, I'm just going to reiterate what you said. This is very important work that Cafe is doing, and if you've got anything at all, please donate to them. And that's about all I've got to say.
I really appreciate both of you making those, supporting this appeal. I'll just throw out there our website. It's menandfamilies.org. menandfamilies.org, and then /donate to make a contribution. That's the new website we built for the center. If you want Cafe site, you can donate there as well. It's equalitycanada.com, and then there's a donate option on the main menu. Dan or Jack, do you know if there is a link on the AVFM site that we can also point people to watch that video? The video is up on our website and on our YouTube channel, Equality Canada TV. But if there's a link up on the AVFM site, it may be easier for some of our listeners to access that.
I believe there's an article.
Oh, good.
On AVFM about your fundraiser. But, yeah, Dan, I think we're getting a little bit low on time, aren't we?
Yeah, we're looking at down to the last few moments. Justin, is there anything else you'd like to throw in?
No, I think I've covered most of the bases. Maybe I'll just reinforce again the unique opportunity that we have. I think I'm hoping that's clear. We have a real chance here to make something new successful, and that if we can do it here, I think we can use this as a model in other communities in Canada, in the U.S., and in other parts of the world. So it's really important that we get this model right. Right now in Toronto, we have a real chance, and especially with that donor matching opportunity. And I am just so excited that we've managed to do this with the support of the community, with all of your support. And I'm sort of feeling humbled by the nature of the work ahead, because we have had these dozens and dozens of men and women who have come in seeking help, often in desperation. And I'm really hoping we can step up and offer them the resources and the support that they need, because if we don't do it, I'm not sure that there's really anywhere else for a lot of these people to go. But I think if we all work together, that we can make this a success.
Jack, anything, man?
No, I just tell everyone, or thank Justin for coming on tonight, and to tell everyone to take the red pill.
That's right, folks. Take the red pill, and remember, you can lead a feminist to logic, but you can't make them think. Don't forget, Cafe's donation drive, dollar for dollar matched. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.
Dan and Jack hope you have enjoyed this episode of Blue Collar Red Pill. The song The Last Ones by the band Jazar is used under Creative Commons license and has been modified for this show. Please visit antimisandry.com and avoiceformen.com for more information on the men's human rights movement.